Hi, Dan Miller, Historical Solutions LLC. I thought I'd kick off. I said I was going to do a brief series between today, which is December 9th, I think it is, Friday, and Christmas, a brief series regarding my book that I wrote last year, Young Men of Montana From Hard Youth to Hawaii Muleskinner. Thank you to Tom Riley for the chance to do that. I thought I'd talk a little bit about, in an opening introductory video, how this might be helpful for young men. I wrote the book for anybody to read it. I wrote the book for anybody who's interested in history to read it. But now I realize that the book has a special message possibly for young men. And by young men, I'm defining, well, I'll let you define that. So young men. So for those of you who are purchasing for young male readers, for those of you who are young men and want to read an interesting book, I point you to this. So Irvin Atchison, our story starts with him when he's 19 years old. The story covers to when he's about 21, so it's a 2 to 3 year period there in his life. In the early 1930s, when he joins the Army and ends up finding himself stationed in Hawaii for a couple of years where things, particularly one thing happens that is really monumentally important in the run-up to World War II. And again, remember, this is the early 1930s. So you would probably expect, and I bet you'd do the same, if you were writing a story like this about a 19-year-old, you'd think about and write about his family, his background, his upbringing. And I do that in here, but I think we should start in this video, the introductory video, we should start with something else, which is place, P-L-A-C-E, place. And I titled this book very specifically, A Young Man of Montana. Now Amazon actually messed it up and I have it listed as Young Man from Montana. I don't know how to get that changed. I'm not going to worry about it. The title is A Young Man of Montana, and that "of" is so important. And I think for young men today, it's worth thinking about for their own situations. Whatever else will be true for Irvin, and we'll talk about it in other short conversations like this. Whatever else was true, he had a second family, and maybe even a first family, and that was the place of Montana. Now, Montana had been part of the Great Plains for generations of native tribes, part of the Great Plains for a brief period as an American territory, and then finally for Irvin, part of the Great Plains as a state in the Union, Montana. And so when he was born in 1914, he's born in the relatively new state of Montana. And that place became his first family. The nature of it, and by that I'm talking about capital N nature. And so you know, I'm not romanticizing or idealizing that word as it applies to Montana in the 19 teens and 20s and early 30s. It's a difficult place. It's beautiful, spectacularly gorgeous. The kind of one of the places that everybody would say is a top 10 in terms of its natural splendor. But that's not really what I mean when I say it's his first family. Yes, he loves natural beauty. Yes, he loves the splendor and the big sky country. But this is nature that could kill you, and often did. This is nature that could hurt you, and often did. This is nature that could catch you off guard, or having made the smallest mistake and turn it into a fatal turn in your life. Nature was hard in the Montana of Irvin Atchison. Blizzards and brush fires and tornadoes and torrential rains and on, heat and cold, and on and on and on. It was a hard life, nature's life in Montana, and yet it left an imprint on him. He loved it. He was of Montana. And I wonder now, as I think about young men hopefully reading this book, I wonder what what is the place for you in your life at this point? I don't know. I'd like to think that it would be true that there's place in your life that acts as almost a first or second family. When Irvin was growing up in the late teens and throughout the 20s, I was thinking about this earlier. The things that affected place were pretty small in number. I'm talking about technology. So if he wanted to go outside of his place, he'd have to read a book or talk to someone who traveled elsewhere, or maybe radio, or perhaps silent motion pictures or photographs. The telephone was another place, another intervening factor in a place. Telegraph was too, for that matter, and on. But that's the list, technologically speaking. That's the list that might have gotten in between him and place, and as it turned out, it didn't. But what's true for 2022 and beyond in terms of technology that can get in the way between a young man and place? There's a lot of things, and a lot of them aren't good. That's something that Irvin didn't have to deal with. He had to deal with other things. As I said, the place could kill him. But in terms of technological interventions and technological distractions, he didn't have anywhere nearly as many as what a young man has today. So place was his first family, the place of Montana. He was a young man of Montana. What's your place, and how has it affected who you are as you watch me today, as you read the story of Irvin Atchison? Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great weekend. I wish you all the best.